The new vessels that emerged from faster-than-light travel were unlike anything the humans or Vorin had seen. They came from 11 different civilizations, each ship design unique. Some were sleek and elegant, others bulky and industrial. Some glowed with bioluminescence like the Vorin ships, while others were pure mechanical constructions. But they all broadcast the same message. They had come to help. The fleet belonged to something called the Free Worlds Coalition. These were species scattered across this region of the galaxy. Civilizations that had suffered under Krethic aggression, but had never dared to unite against them. Each had been conquered, threatened, or driven from their homes. Each had submitted or fled rather than fight. Until now, Ambassador Talonra, a Thaylen diplomat, hailed Sentinel's watch. The Thaylen were insectoid beings, their voices producing clicking sounds that their translation devices converted to speech. Admiral Jae-sung of Earth, we received a transmission from Medical Officer Yoonji. We heard how your species risked everything to protect strangers. We heard how you stood against the Krethic when every logical calculation said you should surrender. You have inspired us to finally stop running. Admiral Jae-sung felt a wave of emotion he hadn't expected. He had thought Earth was alone in this fight. But Yoonji's broadcast, sent in exhaustion and desperation, had reached listening ears across the stars. Other species had been watching, wondering if anyone would ever stand up to the Krethic. Humanity's courage had given them the answer they needed. The coalition fleet included the Morvik, aquatic engineers whose ships looked like flowing water frozen in metal form. They brought repair vessels equipped with technology far beyond human capability. The Quilix were avian scouts, their ships small and fast, designed for reconnaissance. Dozens of other species, each bringing their unique strengths, formed a new battle line beside the exhausted human Vorin fleet. Commander Rockvin watched from his damaged flagship as the coalition fleet took up defensive positions. His situation had gone from victory to stalemate to potential disaster. He was outnumbered now, far from Krethic reinforcements, with a crippled command ship and a battle group that had taken unexpected losses. His second-in-command, Groktar, was an older Krethic who had fought in 50 campaigns. He approached Rockvin carefully. "Commander, we should withdraw. Regroup with the main fleet. Return with overwhelming force." But Rockvin was bound by Krethic warrior codes that had been drilled into him since childhood. The Krethic culture was built on strength and conquest. To retreat was to show weakness. To show weakness was to invite destruction. The Krethic had learned this lesson centuries ago when they were enslaved by another empire. They had vowed never to be weak again. "We do not retreat," Rockvin said, his voice harsh with pain from his injuries. "We do not show these prey species that they can make us run. Prepare for final assault." Groktar hesitated. He was tired of war, tired of watching young Krethic die for pride, tired of the endless conquest. But he was also a loyal officer. He began preparing the ships for one last desperate attack. The Free Worlds Coalition and the Human Vorin Alliance prepared to meet them. Commander Tae-wan, now in a replacement ship after his original was destroyed, coordinated with coalition commanders. The combined fleet moved with surprising precision, despite including so many different species who had never worked together before. The Morvik used resonance pulses that disrupted Krethic shield harmonics, making the shields flicker and fail. The Quilix scouts provided perfect intelligence on Krethic ship movements, their enhanced senses seeing things human sensors missed. Human weapons, designed for kinetic impact rather than energy discharge, continued to be devastatingly effective. The Vorin's crystalline hulls still scattered energy weapons, and now dozens of other species added their own unique advantages to the battle. The Krethic formation collapsed under the multi-species assault. Ships that had conquered 14 star systems found themselves unable to adapt to such diverse tactics. The Krethic trained to fight in specific ways against enemies who fought in predictable patterns. But this alliance fought with creativity, flexibility, and most importantly, hope. Commander Rockvin's flagship was surrounded. Multiple ships from different species converged on it, weapons charged and ready to fire. Rockvin sat in his damaged command chair, his body aching from injuries, his mind racing. He could see no path to victory now. In Krethic culture, defeat was unthinkable. The only honorable option was to take as many enemies with him as possible. He reached for the self-destruct controls. His flagship still had power. If he detonated it now, the explosion would destroy at least a dozen enemy ships. It was the Krethic way, If you cannot win, make sure the enemy loses too. His hand was on the control when a transmission came through, audio only. The voice was human, young, and surprisingly gentle. Lieutenant Chang Min, newly promoted after his commander died in the battle, spoke directly to Rockvan. Your crew deserves to live. Honor them, not your pride. There's no shame in survival. There's only shame in wasting lives for nothing. Rockvan froze. The words struck something deep inside him, something the warrior codes had tried to bury. He thought about his crew, young Krethik who had followed orders, who had families back on the homeworld, who dreamed of peace even if they never spoke such dreams aloud. Did they deserve to die for his pride? Before he could decide, Groktar acted. The old second-in-command overrode the self-destruct sequence and transmitted a surrender code to all remaining Krethik vessels. 23 Krethik ships powered down their weapons and shields. The remaining Krethik vessels, seeing their commander's flagship surrender, fled toward Krethik space to report what had happened. The Battle of Titan was over. 14 hours of continuous combat had ended not with total destruction, but with an impossible alliance standing victorious. The casualties were counted in the days that followed. 7 human ships destroyed, 12 heavily damaged, 3,400 human personnel dead, including heroes like Captain Yanwu, pilot Youngsik, and engineer Dalsu. The Vorin had lost 5 more vessels and 8,000 refugees. The Free Worlds Coalition had suffered minimal casualties because they arrived late in the battle. But their courage in coming at all was what mattered. But 77,000 Vorin refugees had survived. Earth's defense fleet, though bloodied, remained intact. And most importantly, something new had been born among the stars. An alliance based not on conquest or domination, but on mutual protection and shared values. Fleet Master Vrelak and Admiral Jae-sung stood together on the observation deck of Sentinel's Watch, looking out at the combined fleet. Ambassador Telenra joined them, along with representatives from a dozen other species. They talked about forming a permanent alliance, a coalition that would stand together against aggression from any source. President Sujin addressed Earth and the listening galaxy in a broadcast that would be remembered for generations. 1 year ago, we were alone in the cosmos. Today, we stand with friends we didn't know existed. We faced hatred and we answered with help. We faced war and we offered peace. We faced an enemy and we made an ally. She was referring to the captured Krethik. Commander Rockvan remained imprisoned, but Groktar and many younger Krethik officers were talking with coalition representatives. They spoke quietly about how the Krethik themselves had once been enslaved, how their culture of conquest came from fear of being weak again, how they were trapped in a cycle they didn't know how to escape. Intelligence Officer Dong Hyun interrogated the Krethik prisoners carefully and learned troubling information. The Krethik Dominion had expanded to 22 star systems. They commanded over 400 warships. The Inner Council was already planning retaliation against Earth for this humiliation, but he also learned something else, something that changed how everyone viewed the Krethik. They were not naturally evil. They were just afraid. Medical Officer Yunji received the Coalition Medal of Compassion created specifically for her. Her broadcast hadn't just called for help. It had reminded the galaxy that courage was worth celebrating, that standing up for others mattered, that someone needed to be first to say no more. Commander Taewon was promoted to captain and given command of Horizon's Promise, Earth's first diplomatic cruiser. Shira Al, the Vorin translator who had coordinated communications during the battle, agreed to serve as his liaison officer. Together they would travel among the coalition worlds, building relationships and strengthening the alliance. But even as celebrations began, a single Krethik stealth probe, hidden in the debris field throughout the battle, completed its mission. It transmitted all battle data back to the Krethik Dominion. On the Krethik throne world, the High Overseer watched recordings of humans fighting to protect strangers and made his decision. The real test was still to come. 3 months after the Battle of Titan, the damaged Vorin fleet prepared to depart for a new home. The ships had been completely repaired with help from human and Morvic engineers. The crystalline hulls gleamed in the sunlight, restored to their full beauty. But the Vorin who boarded those ships were different now. They had arrived as broken refugees, hopeless and dying. They were leaving as survivors with allies and a future. A memorial ceremony was held on Sentinel's Watch. Names were read aloud for every human and Vorin who had died defending freedom. Captain Yeon Woo, pilot Young Sik, engineer Dalsu, and thousands of others. Their names were engraved on a memorial wall built into the station's main corridor, where every person passing through would remember their sacrifice. Fleet Master Vrelak stood beside Admiral Jae Sung during the ceremony. Both leaders had tears in their eyes, though Voran tears glowed faintly with bioluminescence. "We will never forget what humanity did for us," Vrelak said through Shira Al's translation. "You could have turned away. You could have chosen safety. Instead, you chose compassion." Earth had changed dramatically in 3 months. The planet had become the symbolic heart of something called the Terran Free Worlds Coalition. 17 different civilizations had joined the pact, agreeing to share technology, trade goods freely, and defend each other from aggression. For the first time in galactic history, an alliance existed based on choice rather than conquest. The technology exchange was already showing results. The Morvic taught humans how to build better, faster-than-light drives, cutting travel time between star systems in half. The Voreen shared their bioengineering knowledge, allowing humans to grow food more efficiently and treat diseases that had plagued humanity for centuries. The Thalen provided star charts showing dozens of habitable worlds no human had ever seen. Earth was growing up, learning its place in a much larger community. Captain Tae Wan commanded the Horizon's Promise, a ship built specifically for diplomatic missions. It combined human engineering with Voran energy systems and Morvic efficiency improvements. Shira Al served as his permanent liaison officer, and together they had visited 8 coalition worlds in the past months, strengthening relationships and settling minor disputes before they became conflicts. But not everyone was celebrating. Scout Captain Wansik returned from a long-range patrol with urgent news. He had detected massive energy signatures deep in Krathic territory. The Krathic Dominion was gathering ships, pulling vessels from occupied systems and frontier patrols. They were building something the coalition strategist called the Grand Armada. Over 200 warships assembled for one purpose: crushing Earth and everyone who stood with them. President Sujin faced the hardest decision of her life. Should Earth prepare for war, building weapons and training soldiers? Or should they try diplomacy, attempting to reach some understanding with the Krathic before more blood was shed? The debate in the United Earth Assembly was fierce and divided. Captain Taewan volunteered to lead a diplomatic mission directly into Krathic territory. It was dangerous, possibly suicidal, but he believed there had to be another way. Admiral Jae Sung approved the mission with reluctance, knowing he might be sending people to their deaths. The diplomatic team was carefully chosen. Taewan led it, with Shira Al representing the Voran and Ambassador Talanra speaking for the Thalan. But the most surprising addition was Groktar, the Krathic officer who had surrendered at Titan. Groktar had spent months talking with coalition representatives, learning about their cultures, questioning everything he had been taught about strength and weakness. Cultural specialist Yujin joined the mission after spending months studying Krathic history. She had made a shocking discovery. 400 years ago, the Krathic had been peaceful farmers and artisans. Then an ancient empire called the Vex Collective had invaded, enslaving the Krathic for 2 centuries. The Krathic had eventually broken free, but the trauma of enslavement had changed their entire civilization. They became warriors, built a military empire, and vowed never to be weak enough to be enslaved again. Their aggression came from fear, from wounds that had never healed. The journey to the Krathic throne world took 2 weeks. Captain Taewan's ship crossed through systems the Krathic had conquered, seeing the results of their expansion. Some conquered species were treated harshly, forced to provide resources and labor. But Taiwan also saw Krathic civilians, families with children, merchants selling goods, farmers tending crops. The Krathic people were not monsters. They were trapped in a system built on fear and militarism, unable to see any other way forward. Groktar proved invaluable. He spoke with Krathic patrol ships, vouching for the diplomatic team, explaining that they came in peace. Many young Krathic officers were curious about these humans who had fought so well at Titan. Some even expressed quiet admiration, though they would never say such things in front of their commanders. Finally, they reached Krath Prime, the Krathic homeworld. It was a beautiful planet with red forests and purple oceans, cities spread across the continents, built with impressive architecture, but military bases dominated the landscape, and weapon platforms orbited the planet in defensive rings. The Krathic had built their civilization around the expectation of eternal war. High Overseer Thrackmore received the delegation in the Grand War Chamber, a massive hall decorated with trophies from conquered worlds. He was old for a Krithik, his scaled skin marked with scars from decades of combat. He looked at Taiwan with a mixture of curiosity and contempt. "You are brave to come here, human," Thrackmore said through translation devices. "Or perhaps just foolish. Every species we have encountered either submitted to our strength or was destroyed by it. You are no different." Taiwan stood straight and spoke clearly. "We are different. We don't want to be your enemies. We don't want endless war. We want to break the cycle. High Overseer, your people were enslaved once. You know the pain of being conquered. Why inflict that same pain on others?" Thrackmore's expression darkened. "We inflict it so it can never be inflicted on us again. That is the only law that matters. Strength is survival. Weakness is death." Then Yujin stepped forward and presented evidence that changed everything. Deep space probes from the Coalition had detected something at the galactic rim. Ships, thousands of them awakening from some kind of stasis. The energy signatures matched ancient records from multiple civilizations. The Vex Collective was returning. The Vex were not organic beings. They were a mechanical civilization that harvested organic species as biological resources. Every 400 years, they returned to collect what they called the harvest. 20 civilizations had fallen to them over 2,000 years. They were the enemy that had enslaved the Krethik centuries ago. And they were coming back. "Your Grand Armada cannot stop them," Taiwan said quietly. "Neither can our coalition fleet. But together, maybe we have a chance. High Overseer, you can continue preparing to fight us, or you can face the real threat with allies beside you." The Grand War Chamber erupted in argument. Krethik military commanders shouted that this was a trick, that humans were lying to avoid destruction. But Groktar stood and presented testimony from other Krethik officers who had fought at Titan. He spoke about honor, about protecting Krethik families, about breaking cycles of fear. A young Krethik officer named Rentok presented classified reports showing that the Krethik economy was collapsing under military strain. Resources poured into weapons while the population suffered. Recent victories had actually been costly defeats disguised by propaganda. The Dominion was not strong. It was brittle, ready to shatter under real pressure. After 3 days of intense debate, High Overseer Thrackmore made his decision. The Krethik Dominion would halt its expansion. They would join the coalition against the Vex. It was not surrender, Thrackmore insisted. It was strategic alliance against a common enemy. The agreement was fragile, with extremists on both sides opposing it. But it was a beginning. 6 months after the Battle of Titan, an unprecedented fleet assembled. The Terran-free world's Krethik alliance combined over 500 warships from 20 species. Human adaptability, Vorin energy technology, Morvic engineering, Thalen logistics, and Krethik military experience united under one banner. Admiral Jae-sung was named Supreme Commander, with Krethik Fleet Master Groktar as his second-in-command. Captain Taiwan led an elite strike force of mixed-species crews. Medical Officer Yunji established the first interspecies medical corps, training doctors from all coalition species to treat each other. Throughout known space, former enemies worked side by side, preparing for the real threat. The Vex fleet was detected entering known space. Over 1,000 vessels, each one ancient and terrifying, built from technology older than most current civilizations. The coalition stood ready to meet them. President Su Jin made one final broadcast. "We are human. We are Vorin. We are Krethik. We are the coalition of free worlds, and we will show the galaxy that hope is the strongest weapon of all." On the bridge of Horizon's Promise, Captain Taiwan received distress signals from dozens of star systems beyond coalition borders. The Krethik battle group moved through space like a swarm of metal locusts, their formation perfect and intimidating. At their center was the flagship, twice the size of any other vessel, bristling with enough weapons to destroy a moon. Commander Rockvan, the Krethik admiral, sent his final message. There was no diplomacy in his words, no room for negotiation. All vessels will be destroyed. This sector is now Krethik territory. Resistance is pointless, Admiral Jae-sung ignored the message. He had already said everything that needed saying. Now was the time for action. He gathered his commanders for one last strategy meeting. Captain Yanwu suggested using Titan's thick atmosphere and Saturn's massive ring system as tactical advantages. Commander Taiwan proposed something unusual: integrated formations where human and Vorin ships worked together, covering each other's weaknesses. Tactical Officer Sua designed attack patterns that maximized human maneuverability while keeping the slower Vorin vessels protected. Fleet Master Vrelek surprised everyone by insisting the Vorin would not hide behind their protectors. 12 Vorin ships, their weapon systems partially restored, moved to join the human battle line. Vrelek's daughter Shira-Al took position on Sentinel's watch to coordinate communications between the two species. Her rapid translations would be crucial in the chaos of battle. The Krethik attacked with overwhelming force, confident in their numerical superiority. They had done this dozens of times before, crushing resistance from species that had never worked together, never adapted, never fought back effectively. But Commander Rockfin quickly realized this battle would be different. Human ships moved unlike anything the Krethik had encountered. They didn't hold formation like disciplined military vessels. They scattered like birds startled by a predator, each ship moving independently, striking from unexpected angles and then vanishing before the Krethik could respond. Commander Ji-hoon led his corvette squadron through Saturn's rings, using the ice chunks as cover. The Krethik fired massive energy beams that vaporized ice and sent chunks spinning away. But the human ships were already gone, emerging from different positions to fire railgun rounds that punched through Krethik shields. Pilot Youngsik performed maneuvers that seemed impossible, threading his ship between Krethik vessels, launching missiles at point-blank range and then diving toward Saturn's gravity well to escape. His laughter came over the radio, wild and free. These Krethik fly like cargo haulers. Come on, try to catch me. The Vorin ships fought differently. They couldn't match human speed, but they didn't need to. Their crystalline hulls scattered the Krethik energy weapons, making direct hits nearly impossible. The energy beams that should have destroyed a Vorin ship in one shot instead dispersed across the hull, absorbed and redirected harmlessly into space. The Krethik had built their entire military around energy weapons, and suddenly those weapons were only half as effective. Communications Officer Byung-ho, working with Shira-Al, did something brilliant. They used captured Vorin technology to hack into Krethik targeting systems. Suddenly, Krethik ships were seeing false sensor readings, shooting at targets that weren't there, wasting ammunition on ghosts while real human ships struck from their blind spots. In the first hour of battle, 8 Krethik ships were destroyed or disabled. Commander Rockvan watched in growing fury. This small force of primitives and refugees was making his battle group look foolish. He had conquered star systems with less effort than this. The rage that the Krethik were trained to channel in battle now clouded his judgment. All ships full assault, Rockvan commanded. Crush them completely. No survivors. The Krethik abandoned their careful formations and attacked with pure aggression. The tide of battle shifted. With so many Krethik ships attacking at once, the human and Vorin vessels couldn't avoid all the fire. Ships began taking serious damage. Captain Yan Wu's heavy cruiser Indomitable Will positioned itself between a Krethik assault wing and a Vorin hospital ship, carrying thousands of wounded refugees. The cruiser's shields flared bright under sustained fire. Yan Wu's crew fought to keep the shields up, but the damage was catastrophic. Hull breaches appeared across 3 decks. The engineering section was exposed to space. All hands abandoned ship, Yan Wu ordered calmly. Evacuate to the nearest vessels. Move quickly. His crew obeyed, but Yan Wu remained on the bridge. He watched the Vorin hospital ship escape to safety behind Titan, watched his crew reach the escape pods and scatter away from the dying cruiser. Then he did something that would be remembered forever. Yan Wu aimed his crippled ship directly at the Krethik flagship. With the last power available, he pushed the engines to maximum. The Indomitable Will accelerated like a missile, burning through space toward Commander Rockvan's command vessel. The Krethik tried to destroy it before impact, but the human cruiser's momentum was too great. The 2 ships collided in a massive explosion that lit up the darkness like a small sun. The Krethik flagship survived, but barely. Its entire port side was destroyed. Commander Rockvan was injured but alive, his command center a wreck around him. Captain Yanwu died instantly in the collision, but his sacrifice crippled the enemy command ship and saved thousands of Vorin lives. The battle continued for hours. Lieutenant Heian on Sentinel's watch coordinated the defense despite her station taking multiple hits. Shrapnel from a near miss tore through her console, injuring her leg badly. She refused medical attention, staying at her post because the fleet needed her sensor data. Engineer Dalsu and his team were working to restore shields on a damaged Voran vessel when a Krethik torpedo struck their ship. The explosion tore through the engineering bay. Dalsu and 7 human engineers died alongside 4 Voran crew members, all of them trying to save a ship full of refugees they had only met days before. Pilot Young Sik, the man who had laughed in the face of danger, executed one final impossible maneuver. Surrounded by 3 Krethik destroyers with no escape route, he aimed his ship at the cluster and detonated his remaining missiles manually. The explosion destroyed all 3 Krethik vessels and his own ship simultaneously. His last words over the radio were simple: "For Earth, for the Voran, for everyone who deserves to be free." A Voran warrior scholar named Trenix, who had taught literature before the war, performed his own sacrifice. When Commander Taiwan's ship was disabled and drifting helplessly toward a Krethik heavy cruiser, Trenix rammed his vessel into the Krethik ship at full speed. Both ships exploded, but Taiwan's crew survived to be rescued. By the 14th hour of battle, both sides were exhausted. The human Voran fleet had lost 7 ships destroyed and 12 heavily damaged. 3,400 human personnel were dead. The Voran had lost 5 more vessels, and 8,000 refugees had died when one hospital ship's life support failed during the battle. But they had not broken. They had not run. The Krethik had lost 23 ships, with 17 more too damaged to continue fighting. Commander Rockvin's flagship was barely functional. His carefully trained battle group had been bloodied by a force they had expected to crush in minutes. The tactical genius of the Krethik military had been matched and exceeded by the unpredictable creativity of humans, combined with Voran resilience. The battle reached a stalemate. Neither side had the strength to deliver a final blow. Both fleets held their positions, weapons ready, waiting to see who would break first. Medical Officer Yunji, exhausted from treating wounded for hours, made a decision that would change everything. She sent out an uncoded broadcast on all frequencies, not caring who might hear it. Her voice was tired but passionate as she described the battle, the sacrifices, the courage of both humans and Voran standing together against tyranny. She spoke about Captain Yanwu ramming the flagship, about Young Sik's laughter even in death, about Voran refugees fighting alongside their human protectors. She didn't know if anyone would hear her message. She just needed to tell someone, anyone, what was happening here at Titan, what humanity and the Voran were fighting for. Then the sensors on Sentinel's watch began screaming alerts again. Lieutenant Hei-In, still at her damaged station despite the blood soaking through her uniform, called out in shock. Multiple warp signatures. Dozens of ships. They're coming in fast. Admiral Jae-sung tensed. If these were more Krethik reinforcements, the battle was over. Earth had nothing left to give. The unknown ships emerged from faster-than-light travel, but they weren't Krethik. The 3 Krethik scout ships emerged from the darkness like hunting predators. Their hulls were angular and sharp, covered in dark metal that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Weapon ports lined their sides, and their design spoke of one purpose only: war. A transmission burst across all frequencies. The voice was harsh and mechanical, clearly translated by some computer system. "Attention, unknown vessels. You are harboring fugitives of the Krethik Dominion. Surrender the Voran refugees immediately, or face complete destruction. You have been warned." On Sentinel's watch, Admiral Jae-sung stood straight and calm. He had fought in the Mars Rebellion years ago, back when human colonies had disagreed about independence. He knew how to face threats. His response was simple and clear. "This is Admiral Jae-sung of the United Earth Defense Fleet. The Voran are under our protection. We do not surrender refugees to anyone. Leave our space peacefully or face the consequences." Commander Taiwan listened to the exchange from his scout ship, still docked with one of the Voran vessels. He couldn't help but admire the Admiral's courage, even though he knew the truth. Earth's forces near Titan were small. 3 scout ships, a few corvettes, and the station itself. Against 3 Krethik warships, they might hold out for a while. But if more Krethik came, the outcome was uncertain. The Krethik commander, who identified himself as Thokmar, seemed amused by the Admiral's defiance. "You protect aliens you do not know? How foolish. But I am not unreasonable. I will give you 6 hours to reconsider. My main battle group will arrive then. When they do, your choice will be made for you. Resist, and your entire station will be destroyed." These are not threats. These are facts. 6 hours. It wasn't much time, but it was something. Taewon used every minute. He bought extra time by engaging Thokmar in conversation, claiming ancient salvage rights over the Voran fleet. The argument was weak, but it kept the Krethik talking instead of shooting. Meanwhile, Admiral Jae Sung sent urgent messages throughout the solar system, calling every available ship to Titan. Inside the Voran vessels, Medical Officer Eunji and her team worked frantically. The conditions were worse than they had feared. Thousands of Voran were injured, malnourished, and exhausted. The Vorian were hexapedal beings, walking on 6 legs with bodies covered in bioluminescent skin that changed colors based on their emotions. Right now, most of them glowed a dim, sad blue. Eunji had never treated an alien before. Nobody had. But she found that compassion worked the same way regardless of species. When a young Voran child was frightened of the medical equipment, Eunji smiled gently and moved slowly, just like she would with a human child. The child's skin shifted from blue to a lighter green, which Eunji learned meant the child felt safer. Engineer Dalsu was having better luck with the Voran technology than he expected. The Vorin used biological computing systems, growing their technology rather than building it with metal and circuits. It was completely different from human engineering, but Dalsu was fascinated. Working alongside Voran engineers, he began to understand the logic behind their designs. Together, they managed to restore power to 3 more ships, giving those vessels basic life support and maneuvering capability. Commander Taewon finally met Fleet Master Vrelak in person. The Voran leader was old, his bioluminescent skin flickering between colors in a way that suggested deep fatigue, but his eyes were sharp and intelligent. Through Vrelak's daughter, Shiraal, who served as translator, they began to understand each other. "Your people are brave," Vrelak said through Shiraal's translation. "We have encountered 43 species in our travels across the stars. None have ever stood between the Krethik and their prey. Most run, some negotiate, a few submit immediately. But stand and fight? Never." "Then no one has ever stopped the Krethik?" Taewon asked. Shiraal's skin dimmed to a deep purple, which Taewon was learning meant sadness or grief. "The Krethik have conquered 14 star systems in the last 20 years. They are relentless. They take what they want and destroy what they cannot use. Our homeworld fell 3 months ago. We are all that remains of the Voran collective." The words hung heavy in the air. Taewon thought about Earth, about the billions of people there who had no idea how dangerous the galaxy really was. Humanity had been so focused on exploring and building colonies. They had never really considered that something out there might want to hurt them. "We will not abandon you," Taewon said firmly. "That's not who we are." Ships began arriving from across the solar system. Commander Ji-hoon brought a squadron of fast attack corvettes from Mars. Captain Yanwoo arrived with the heavy cruiser Indomitable Will, one of Earth's most powerful warships. Defense Minister Kyung-min authorized the deployment of experimental railguns and missile systems, weapons that had never been tested in real combat. The human fleet assembled near Titan was still small compared to what was coming. But every ship that arrived brought more hope. Scientist Minji made an important discovery while studying the Voran hull materials. The crystalline structures that covered Voran ships could disperse energy weapons naturally. It was a built-in defense that the Voran had developed over centuries of peaceful trading, never knowing it would become crucial for survival. Dr. Wu Bin and Engineer Dalsu worked together with Voran engineers to create a new strategy. If they could combine Voran energy-dispersing crystals with human kinetic weapons and tactical flexibility, they might have a chance. It was a desperate plan, but it was better than no plan at all. During a brief rest period, something unexpected happened. Young Voran children, despite everything they had been through, began gifting small crystalline sculptures to the human medical teams. The sculptures were beautiful, each one unique, each one created from materials the Voran had carried from their lost homeworld. Lieutenant Hae-in received one that looked like a star going supernova, frozen in crystal. She held it carefully, feeling the weight of trust it represented. Voran musicians performed for the exhausted human engineers, their instruments creating sounds that resonated in harmonics no human instrument could match. It was haunting and beautiful, a melody of loss and hope combined. Food specialist Seok Jin worked with Voran nutritionists to adapt human rations so the Voran could eat them safely. Slowly, despite the language barriers and biological differences, The two species began to understand each other. Both humans and Vorin valued family. Both cherished freedom. Both wanted peace. The specifics of their cultures were different, but the fundamentals were the same. They had more in common than what separated them. 6 hours passed too quickly. Admiral Jae-sung gathered his commanders for a final briefing. 28 human ships now formed Earth's defense fleet. It was every vessel they could gather in the time available. 12 partially repaired Vorin ships with working weapons would join the battle line. The remaining Vorin vessels carrying civilians and the wounded were positioned behind Titan's bulk for protection. Captain Yan Wu spoke for everyone when he said, "We're outnumbered. We're outgunned, but we're not going to run." Lieutenant Hayen's sensors began screaming alerts. The main Krethik battle group had arrived. 61 warships emerging from faster-than-light travel in a precise military formation. They were battle-hardened vessels, scarred from previous conquests, crewed by warriors who had never known defeat. Admiral Jae-sung received a final message from President Soo-jin on Earth. It was brief but powerful. Make them remember Earth. The Admiral looked at his assembled commanders, human and Vorin, together. All ships to battle stations. Today we show the galaxy what humanity stands for. We stand for those who cannot stand for themselves. We fight for those who cannot fight. And we do not back down from bullies no matter how big they are. Commander Taewon returned to his ship, his hand steady on the controls despite the fear he felt. Beside him on the communications panel was the crystal sculpture the Vorin child had given him. It caught the light from the console and sparkled with inner fire. The Krethik battle group began its approach. The battle for Titan was about to begin. The cold darkness of space stretched endlessly beyond Neptune's orbit. Commander Taewon sat in his usual chair at the command center of Sentinel's Watch, the orbital station floating above Titan. It was a quiet night shift, the kind where nothing usually happened. He sipped his coffee and watched the screens display their normal patterns of stars and distant ice chunks. Then everything changed. Lieutenant Hayen straightened suddenly at her sensor station. Her fingers moved quickly across the controls, her face showing confusion and then concern. "Commander, I'm picking up something strange. Energy signatures beyond Neptune. Multiple sources. This isn't anything in our database." Taewon set down his coffee and walked to her station. The screens showed readings that made no sense. Large objects, dozens of them, drifting through space where nothing should be. "Can you get a clear count?" 47 vessels, sir. They're massive, much bigger than our largest ships. Hayen's voice was steady, but Taewon could hear the excitement beneath it. "Commander, they're not moving under power. They're just drifting." Communications Officer Byung-ho suddenly spoke up from across the room. "Sir, I'm receiving transmissions." It's not English. It's not any human language. But there are patterns, mathematical sequences. Someone is trying to talk to us. Taewon felt his heart beat faster. In all of humanity's time in space, they had never found anyone else. Earth had sent probes to nearby stars, established colonies on Mars and Titan, even reached Alpha Centauri. But they had always been alone. Until now. "Get me Admiral Jae-sung," Taewon said quietly. "Wake him if you have to. This is important." Admiral Jae-sung arrived at the command center within minutes, his uniform hastily put on but his eyes sharp and alert. He studied the sensor readings carefully, then looked at Taewon. "Unknown vessels. Unknown origin. They could be a threat. They could also need help, sir," Taewon replied. "Those energy signatures are weak. If those are ships, their power systems are failing." The Admiral nodded slowly. "Take 3 scout ships. Get close enough to see what we're dealing with. But Taewon, be careful. We don't know what's out there." Taewon gathered his team quickly. He would pilot the lead scout ship himself, with 2 others following behind. Pilot Young-sik, one of the best flyers in the fleet, would command the second ship. Within an hour, they were moving through space toward the unknown vessels. As they got closer, Young-sik's voice came over the radio. "Commander, are you seeing this? There's debris everywhere. Pieces of metal, frozen atmosphere, what looks like damage from weapons." Taewon saw it too. The space around the unknown fleet looked like a battlefield. Whatever these ships were, they had been in a fight. A bad one. Then the vessels themselves came into view and Taewon caught his breath. They were beautiful in a strange way. The hulls had an organic look, covered in crystalline structures that caught the distant sunlight and made it shimmer. But they were also clearly damaged. Holes punctured the hulls. Some of the crystals were cracked or missing. Several ships listed to the side, obviously unable to control their position. Byung-ho, are you getting those transmissions? Taewon asked over the radio back to Sentinel's watch. Yes, sir. They're getting stronger. The patterns are definitely mathematical. Wait, I'm running it through the translation programs. It's going to take time, but I think they're trying to establish communication. Taewon moved his scout ship closer to what appeared to be the largest vessel in the fleet. As he approached, he could see figures moving behind transparent sections of the hull. They weren't human. The shapes were different, with more limbs than people should have, and their skin seemed to glow faintly. His radio crackled. Commander Taewon, this is Sentinel's watch. We've managed a basic translation. They call themselves the Vorin Collective. They're refugees. They were attacked by something called the Krethik Dominion. Their faster-than-light drives are broken. Life support is failing on many ships. They have over 85,000 people on those vessels. Sir, they're dying. Taewon felt a cold weight in his stomach. 85,000 lives. Families, children. All of them stranded in the cold darkness of space. Far from home, far from help. Except now help had found them. Tell them we're here to assist, Taewon said. Tell them Earth wants to help. Over the next few hours, more information came through. The Vorin were peaceful traders from a star system 200 light-years away. The Krethik were an empire that conquered other civilizations. 3 months ago, the Krethik had invaded the Vorin homeworld. The Vorin fleet had escaped, but barely. Their leader, Fleet Master Vrelek, had ordered a desperate jump through damaged warp gates. They had hoped to find safety. Instead, they had found themselves lost in unknown space, their ships falling apart around them. Back on Sentinel's watch, Admiral Jae-sung contacted Earth immediately. President Soo-jin called together the United Earth Assembly for an emergency meeting. The debate was intense. Some voices urged caution. Military advisor Sang-woo warned that helping the Vorin could make Earth a target of this Krethik Dominion. No one knew how powerful the Krethik were, or how they would react to human interference. But other voices spoke louder. Dr. Woo-bin, Earth's chief xenobiologist, confirmed that the Vorin were carbon-based life forms like humans. Their distress was real. UN Ambassador Hyo-jin reminded everyone that humanity had always valued helping those in need. This is our chance, she said, to show the galaxy what kind of civilization we are. After hours of discussion, President Soo-jin made the decision. Earth would provide humanitarian aid to the Vorin fleet. It didn't matter that the Vorin were strangers. It didn't matter that there might be risks. It was the right thing to do. Admiral Jae-sung received his orders and immediately began organizing the relief effort. Supply ships were loaded with food, medical equipment, and repair materials. Engineering teams prepared to help fix the damaged Vorin vessels. Medical teams studied the limited information about Vorin biology to prepare for treating injuries. Commander Taewon was ordered to stabilize the Vorin fleet until the larger support convoy could arrive from Earth. His engineers began docking procedures with the Vorin ships, carefully connecting airlocks and power cables. Everything seemed to be going well. Then Lieutenant Hayen's voice cut through the activity, sharp with alarm. Commander, long-range sensors are picking up new contacts. Multiple vessels entering the Kuiper belt from beyond our solar system. The signature matches debris we found around the Vorin fleet. Taewon's blood went cold. The Krethik? Yes, sir. 3 scout ships. And Commander, they're heading straight for us. The Krethik had followed the Vorin trail. They had found Earth. And now humanity would have to decide if they were truly willing to stand between refugees and their hunters. The quiet night shift on Sentinel's watch was over. Something much bigger was beginning. Something that would change humanity's place in the galaxy forever. The coffee on Taewon's desk had gone cold, forgotten. Outside the station's windows, the damaged Vorin fleet drifted silently, waiting. And beyond them, growing closer with each passing moment, 3 angular warships approached, bristling with weapons and hostile intent. Earth's first contact with alien life had begun, and it was nothing like anyone had imagined.